guys, we are back. This is the Shillan and Duffy show. We're going live. We're going to be recapping UFC 252 that just went down at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. We had a trilogy fight for the heavyweight title between Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier. They just wrapped up. I mean, the credits was rolling about 10 minutes ago. I am your host. I am Keith Shillan. I'm a writer for Sherdog and Cage Side Press, and I am joined by the great senior editor of Sherdog.com, Mr. Ben Duffy. Ben, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. As you just mentioned, the fights just wrapped up a few minutes ago. I am just a little bit buzzing, as I usually am after a big heavyweight title fight, and I cannot wait to dig in.
Yeah, I did a radio show today, and the guy, it was for the sports fan, something like that. It's an all sports network in Canada, and when someone messaged me and said, "Hey, I could see how excited you were. Like, you were so excited," and I'm still excited. The events went down, and I'm still excited today as I was at 4:25 Eastern time today when I spoke to the great host. I don't remember the guy's name, but he was. You could tell he was like a stick and ball sports kind of guy, and didn't really care about MMA, but he had to cover it for the 15 minutes we talked. Let's get right into it because there's a lot of stick and ball sports people that would have tuned in to say I got a lot of messages. I always know how big a pay-per-view is going to be based on who messages me and who should I bet on and who do you think's going to win and this and that. I got a lot of messages, so I think this fight is going to do this pay-per-view is going to do very well. Did you get a lot of those reaching out to you?
I did, and that is also one of my metrics. Just how many of my friends who used to be MMA fans or have been kind of casual peripheral fans for a long time, how many of them reach out to me and want not just picks, but who is this guy? How did he get here? Or is this the same Felice Herrig I saw a couple years ago? Just those kind of things. Got a ton of them. They're the people that always get at me through Facebook, and my Facebook inbox was quite full yesterday and today.
Yeah, so I got messages about the main event, Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier. You got messages about Felice Herrig in Verna Jindrov. It seems like your casual fans are a little more hardcore than my friends. Let's get into it. Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier. This is the third time they fought. The first time, Daniel Cormier knocked out Stipe Miocic in the first round. Second time, Stipe Miocic knocked out Daniel Cormier in the fourth round. This time, we actually went to the judges' decision. It was a unanimous decision. And still, Stipe Miocic defends his UFC title. He wins the trilogy fight. There's a lot to unwrap. I'm going to kind of give a little layout of what we're going to do. First, I want to talk about the actual fight. Then I want to talk about basically Stipe, where we go from him, his legacy. We'll get into all that. And then, obviously, we got to cover Daniel Cormier, who says this is his last fight. Fantastic fight. I wouldn't give it an A, but I'd give it like a B+. I would say it's the best you can expect from a soon-to-be 38-year-old on Wednesday and a 41-year-old heavyweight. Do you agree with that?
I would say so, yes.
Yeah. It was action-packed. They went 25 minutes. It wasn't a dull moment. I mean, the most dull moments was when the oppressor gets the cage. But so much stuff was happening in that. It wasn't like guys weren't stalling. Stipe was pressing him against the cage, but he was working in a way that a lot of people don't see. So let's talk about both guys' strategies, what was working for one, what wasn't working. And there was a lot of adjustments. But I think the best adjustments was by Stipe Miocic. So go back. I want to go all the way back to the first fight, or the lead into the first fight. If someone said that a fighter would make in-cage adjustments and that would lead to victories, I think we both probably would have said that would be Daniel Cormier. Like Daniel Cormier was the smart guy, kind of had that Randy Couture type image, where Stipe Miocic was just a guy who kind of beat people by his athleticism and accuracy. But in the last two fights, I believe it's been Stipe Miocic who not only did he make the adjustments, also his corner, who's strong style in Ohio, they're not known. They're not one of these major gyms that their coaches don't get this type of press that AKA. I think two fights in a row they outcoached AKA Javier Vasquez, Crazy Bob Cook, all those guys. Do you agree with me that?
I completely agree with you all the way down. The guy who made better adjustments from fight to fight, and then also from round to round within the fights, was definitely Stipe Miocic.
Yeah, so some things I want to. So right away, when I talked about on the roundtable, I said movement is the biggest thing. I said movement in wrestling. And the first thing I said about movement is Stipe is going to have to move laterally a lot to keep Daniel Cormier on the end of his punches. And I said Daniel Cormier is going to have to move forward and get in the pocket. When they first started out, Stipe Miocic was not moving, and he really didn't move that much the entire fight. He kind of gave Daniel Cormier the range they wanted. And while I was watching early, I said, this small cage is going to kill him because he can't move around as much. And then I said, well, maybe he realizes that and he doesn't want to waste the energy by moving so much when he knows that regardless of moving, Daniel Cormier is always going to be able to cut off the cage and be there. But then he made an adjustment where he turned the small cage into an advantage, and that was by winning the clinching. Like, he didn't win the clinch striking. Like, any striking that was landed in the clinch was still Daniel Cormier. But the clinch wrestling, the clinch grappling, which I don't think anybody would expect this, was won by Stipe Miocic. One thing that Daniel Cormier was kept doing and did in the first fight it was the move that knocked out Stipe Miocic. He did that. He reached out. He's doing like your classic overhook, but instead of being like near the shoulder, near the outside of the shoulder, he moved it all the way up like near the neck, and he was using it as a block for keeping Stipe Miocic's head in place. So when he had the underhook and he did a classic wrestling pummel, instead of like, when you come, most guys you want to be underhook, but when your opponent starts getting in, you kind of pummel your arm back in. He'd pummel out and go over the top and land that right hand. In the first fight, he knocked him out. Even though he didn't knock out Stipe Miocic this one, he landed it God knows how many times. It was still that money punch for him. But I love how he hanged the arm and would use that as a place so Stipe couldn't move his head to land it. Stipe made an adjustment and he said, "Well, I'll just go with your classic. You're going to give me that. I'm going to use the underhook." And he pressed him right against the cage, weight on him, and that wrestling just pushing Daniel and having his weight on him, I think really slowed Daniel Cormier down late, and especially in the fifth round when it came down. I had a 2-2 in that fifth round. That was the difference. I kind of buried the lead there. How did you score the fight?
48-47, Stipe.
Okay, so I'm assuming you gave Cormier the first and the fourth?
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly how I had it.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that stood out to me is you could make an argument for Stipe in all 5 rounds. He was competitive in all 5 rounds.
Yes.
The rounds that Daniel won, he was doing very well in the second round until he got hit. So, yeah, I didn't see anybody score it for Daniel Cormier. Anybody I respect, I should say. There was the idiots on Twitter, but I didn't see any media members or anything. Did you see anybody that you respect score for Daniel Cormier?
There were among the media, there's 3 or 4 people that scored it for Cormier, including a couple of pretty sharp people, but overwhelmingly, everybody had it for Stipe.
Yeah, I'm surprised anybody did. I thought there was 3 rounds with Claire. I thought you could have made argument for 4 or even 5 rounds.
And see, the thing is, DC knew it too. When you saw them reading off the scores, as soon as they said 49-46, Cormier just put his hand down and frowned, because he knew that if he was going to win that fight, it was going to be just this razor close, maybe even a splitter. As soon as he heard 49-46 and then 48-47, he was like, okay. He knew Absolutely. He lost.
I think that some of that has to do with his commentating skills. He actually knows, when they start reading 3 in a row, it's all going for one guy. It's not like a split decision. And he had to know that the second and third he lost. He almost got knocked in the second, took the entire third round off. So he knew his best chance was a 48. When he heard the 49, that's when he ducked his head, shook his head. He knew. Yeah. So I want to talk about some things. The fight was really close. It came down to the 5th round on 2 of the judges' scorecards. It came down to the 5th round on both of our scorecards, many people's scorecards. I feel like everything went wrong for Daniel Cormier, and he still almost won the fight, which is pretty incredible. And what I mean by that is all the advantages that Stipe Miocic had on Daniel Cormier, happened. Stipe Miocic had a knockout, power advantage. Caught him in the second round, almost knocked him out. He had a weight advantage, not on the scales, but physique and he used his size by leaning against and wearing him out. One thing we talked about was Daniel Cormier's cast take, and he really slowed down late in the fight. Like, all these things happened, and he still almost won the fight.
Yep. And like at the end of the first round, I was thinking that DC was gonna knock out Stipe. Just the way that right hand, primarily on the break, the same way he knocked him out in the first fight. I think he'd landed that 5 times and missed it once. And while like it was hitting him clean, and Stipe was clearly feeling it, but like you said, he made adjustments. Cormier hit him with the right, numerous times throughout the fight. But after the first round, it wasn't that he was just nailing him every time, they disengaged.
Yeah, so Daniel Cormier, like I said, everything went wrong, but I think he did a lot of things right. Like what you were just talking about, he was landing these shots. He was landing these shots because he was fake shooting and coming over the top and landing shots, and they were awesome. Or he'd get in that clinch and land the shot. I also noticed he protected his body. I mean, he got a couple body shots in, but he protected his body. He came instead of his hands out like this. I don't know why I do this every single show. I do hand motions and stuff that nobody sees because it's audio. But he was reaching his hands out. Like, he didn't get to do that. He stayed in tight the whole time. His elbows were dug into his. It was definitely more of a boxing, classic boxing protect the ribs with your arms style. But everything was going well. I gave DC the first round. He was well on his way of winning the second round, and Miocic caught him with one punch and changed the entire trajectory. Like, Miocic's power is like the great equalizer. And I think if that wasn't Daniel Cormier and that was other heavyweights, they would have been knocked out there.
That's quite possible. I mean, he is one of the smaller top heavyweights. He weighed in about as light. I believe this was as light as he's ever weighed in for a UFC fight. But even normally, he's kind of 245 or so. He's just not a big heavyweight, but he has precision, because it doesn't look like he's just winding up on everything he throws. He has the kind of power that comes from just good mechanics and good technique.
Yeah, knowing how to shift his weight. A lot of that has to do with his wrestling. He also was a football player. Like, just knowing how to balance. And one thing you talked about, how good a shape Daniel Cormier came in. He came in phenomenal shape. So did Stipe Miocic. Like, that was the thing that stood out to me. Like, when he came in, I just kept tweeting, like, wow, he looks like a big welterweight. like yeah. He looked like a white Kamaru Usman. like he was, you could see he's huge. I'm like, oh my God, that is not the physique of a heavyweight.
No, there's 2 guys in the division that if you don't have them standing next to any other people to let you know how big they are, you wouldn't know that they were like 6'4" or 6'5" guys. It's him and Curtis Blades are the 2 guys that if you just see them standing by themselves and you didn't know they were heavyweights, their physique doesn't look like a big man physique.
Yeah. One last thing I want to talk about before, in the X's O's, we talked about everything going wrong. One thing we didn't mention is in the 4th round where Daniel Cormier is starting to get a little momentum back. Late in the 3rd round, he got this terrible eye poke. His entire which be his left eye closed up. He said in the post-fight with the interview with Joe Rogan that he couldn't see out of it. And it's not one of those guys where guys are making excuses. Like, his eye, like, he looked different. Like, his face, like, it didn't look like Daniel Cormier. Like, it was closing up. It looked really bad. But he still fought through it and made it competitive. Out of everything that happened, between the eye pokes, between the wrestling, between the power, what would you credit as the biggest reason why Stipe Miocic won?
Biggest reason was that he found a way to deny Cormier that just short right at will, and then Cormier again electing not really to lean on the wrestling. The UFC booth was pretty vocal about it, and most of the analyst types that I heard and listened to going into the fight all seem to agree that Cormier should use his wrestling as an avenue to victory. I have the feeling that it wasn't an ego thing. I saw some people say, no, he just wants the knockout. No, Daniel Cormier wants to win. I think it was a gas tank thing, because it's not that much work if you are fighting an inferior wrestler. You just shoot a perfect double and plow him down and land it in guard. But working for takedowns against somebody who knows how to defend and is bigger than you, that takes a lot out of your tank. Whether you get the takedown or not, it is exhausting.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So some things I want to comment about this. So in the first round, when he did get that takedown, Stipe, he landed the single, put him right to his back, which DC's an absolute. How he does that, he's an absolute master. He went with the, catching the head like you would on a regular pin. They call it a reverse half Nelson in wrestling, and he was hooking the leg like you would a cradle. And Stipe cut his hips, got up to his knee, worked back up, and DC didn't have much control time. To me, that was a huge issue because in the first fight, in the second fight, he picked him up, slammed him down, and the rest of the round was over. To not be able to do that to Stipe, and being that he's 41 years old. I interviewed Josh Emmett recently. It was right before the Shane Burgos fight, and I asked him, like, hey, like, everyone's expecting this stand-up war, but you also come from a wrestling background. Like, what part of you just says, hey, I can go out wrestling? And he talks about, like, you know how hard it is to wrestle? You made a good point. And as you get older, it gets even harder. Daniel Cormier's 41. To use, you already knew that he had like a limited gas tank. To one thing we talked about on Roundtable, I said the second part. We already talked about the movement. My second point was the wrestling. I said, and I believe this was Daniel's got to have to get takedowns and win rounds with the takedowns. I said that was my point 2, and then point 3 says, but for Stipe, he's just got to be competitive wrestling. He's got to make the wrestling actually drain DC instead of draining him. And I actually think that's a problem. And it gets to a certain point where. What guys still wrestle deep into their careers late? Nobody. Like
almost nobody. Like they all abandoned it.
I mean, and it's just not there anymore. It's a skill set that wrestling is an explosive sport. It's quick timing. It's all the things that you need when you're young. The ability to change direction on it. You get on you're shooting a single and cut the corner to a double, chain this, take the, like, all these things are part of being a great athlete. That's really hard to do. I mean, Randy Couture did it, that's probably it. Mm-hmm. I mean, he had a much different style. He had a Greco-Roman style, not a shooting under your hip style.
And by the later part of his career, he didn't even necessarily want the takedown or want it right away because he had just become so good at the clinch and at dirty boxing there that he could stay there. He could conserve his gas tank while making the other person work. And hey, if they get tired enough, he will trip them down, change levels. But if not, he's winning the round. He's beating them up. They're getting frustrated. I mean, that carried Couture for the last 5, 6, 7 years of his career.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that's how DC looked at a lot of the wrestling in this one, is getting that clinch position and trying to win it. The problem is he didn't win. I mean, he won it in the middle of the cage by about midway through the fight. It was about the third round where Stipe completely changed the clinch, and the clinch became the part where Stipe was initiating. I don't think anybody ahead of time would have been saying Stipe needs to initiate. I think it was an absolute brilliant game plan. Hats off to that whole team. The other thing we talk about wrestling is we talk about the explosion, the timing, all that, and how much energy it takes out of you. But think about this. You shoot underneath somebody, and now you have a heavyweight sprawl on you. You have a heavyweight on top of you. So that's worst case scenario. You go for takedown, and you end up on bottom, and you're already tired, and you have Stipe sprawled on you, hammer fisting you on the side of the head or whatever. While I would have liked to see DC, wrestle more, maybe change up his strategy, try little snatch singles, like head push the head, try to do a snatch single. But those are hard to land. It kind of happen at you see it in wrestling, but it usually happens against scrubs. Like, you don't see it often. And there was times he had a double over and under, and I'm like, well, I mean, he technically could go for a lazy lat drop, but that's a high risk move. That and that also I don't know what they call it, lazy lateral, because he uses even more energy than probably a double. I want to talk about the clinch again. I know I'm probably staying on this point too long, and people who don't enjoy wrestling is going to be really bored by it. But there's some things that Stevie was doing that I liked about the clinch is he was framing a lot. Like, he would frame, like when DC got he would go to the other and frame on the other side, pushing DC's head away, pressing DC back. So he used it for a couple things. One, to wear him down, but also almost use it as a takedown defense. And then when he got DC's weight, on the fence instead against him, and then he's pressing his own weight on top of it. It was absolutely brilliant. Anything else? I don't know. I don't have a question. I just want to talk about the technique.
But no, I mean, the framing also kind of helped him define and determine the distance in the clinch. Because we've talked before, there's a close clinch where you're just chest on chest and Kamaru Usman is just pushing you through the cage like a sieve. Yeah. And then there's, more of a Thai style clinch where they're trying to give themselves room to like stick their knees in your ribs. And I thought Stipe was doing a good job by framing it, holding Cormier out at a distance where, it was harder for him to knee him just because he's much shorter. He couldn't, drop levels or get in on his hips even if he wanted to. I thought it was really, really good tactics in there.
Okay, so let's do this. So the title of this fight, everyone was saying the greatest UFC heavyweight champion of all time. That's put to bed, right? Like Stevie Miocic, there's no debate, right? Stipe's
no debate.
Okay, so we'll just move right on. He's the greatest. To add a second win over Daniel Cormier, he had the lead and it just extended it. Like it's like you're playing Mario Kart and you're in the lead, and then you got like the rocket booster and you hit the button. Like he's way ahead now. It's like it'd be a very long time for catch up. So let's do this. I'm gonna take it one way and see if we can answer two questions I want to ask in the same way. And I'll ask these questions, and then I want to. I'll ask this question, and then that's going to lead to the other two questions. Okay. Who is the greatest, in your opinion, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, who is the greatest fighter of all time?
Just greatest fighter of all time?
Regardless weight class.
George St. Pierre.
Okay, so I go with John Jones, you go to St. Pierre. Okay. Would you say the other guy is your number two? Like
yes,
I would put St. Pierre 2, you put John Jones as 2.
They're 1A, 1B.
Okay.
You catch me on a different day, I might say Jones.
Yeah. This is not what I want to debate. I just want to who's number 3? I'm going to go Demetrius Johnson, but you go who?
I might go Anderson Silva.
Okay. Who's number 4?
Demetrius Johnson in that case.
All right, who's number 5? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
It gets a lot tougher
and
there.
I didn't give you a free warning. I didn't give you a warning.
No, you didn't give me a warning, but that's okay.
Let me so we don't have to go by set order. Who have you not named yet that's better than Stevie Miocic? So you said George St. Pierre, John Jones, Anderson Silva, Demetrius Johnson. Who else do you have ranked above Stevie Miocic?
Maybe Jose Aldo.
Okay, Jose Aldo at 5, and you put Stevie Miocic at 6.
And honestly,
bearing you might forget about somebody.
Yeah. But I might even need to look right now and kind of take a look at Aldo's career, fight by fight versus Stipe's.
Yeah. I mean, we're not holding anybody to the list. Like, don't add us with you. This is literally something I just thought on the spot, and I'm 100% okay with your list. The reason why I wanted to ask this, so now you have Stipe at 6. Bearing, you might have forgot somebody.
Sure.
Because I didn't give you any fair warning. So my question was basically, I wanted to see where you rank Stipe all time, and then I want to see if you had him number 1 at heavyweight, and you have him 6th all time, give or take, and you have him number 1 heavyweight ever.
And even if I sat down and thought about this for a long time and came up with a really well thought out list, I would probably get Stipe into the top 10 by this point.
Yeah. I think I had him in the top 10 already, and then you put Daniel. You went a trilogy on Daniel Cormier, which is his 4th title defense, his second reign as champion. I just was going to ask you, like, the debate for greatest UFC heavyweights put away now just comes down to, do you have Stipe ranked higher than Fedor Emelianenko?
You will not find a bigger fan of Fedor Emelianenko than me. I mean, he was a god when I got into this sport. But a champion in MMA today just runs a different gauntlet than he did. Like, I think Stipe has now defended the UFC heavyweight title as many times as Fedor defended the Pride title, even though he, won like a zillion fights in a row. He had
Zulazinho.
He had sideshow fights. He had non-title fights against people that did not belong in the ring with him at all.
He had Mark Hunt coming off a loss early in Mark Hunt's career. He had. Yeah.
And I don't want to tear down his legacy. It's not for me to tear down, but because he was a god. He seemed larger than life, and for what Pride put in front of him and the chances they gave him to excel and prove himself, he aced it.
Yeah,
he was absolutely beating the best heavyweights on the planet for most of his reign. It's a shame that he didn't get, things didn't play out differently for him after the fall of Pride.
Yeah.
But
so I'm going to do this right on live. Let's do this sometime. Let's book a midweek Shillan and Duffy show specifically for the title of GOATs in the weight class. And we spend the whole episode going through the weight classes and discuss, debate, whatever. I don't want to go dig too much in Stipe versus Fedor, which I'm sure is going to be already happening on Twitter. It's been happening on Facebook groups and I'm sure the Sherdog forums. Sherdog forums are probably going crazy over it. The what I would say the best pro Stipe argument, and like I said, I don't want to dig too much into this, is the run he's on. Like you say, his title defenses or his title matches. Fabricio Verdum, and I might have the order. Fabricio Verdum, Alistair Overeem, Junior Dos Santos. It might be the other way around. I can't remember. Daniel Cormier. Like that 5-fight, and I know he had the loss of Daniel in there, but that 5-fight stretch is way more impressive than any 5-fight stretch Fedor and Melikiel had.
Yes.
Okay. Now flip. I always like to feel like the best way, if you can debate, you should be able to debate both sides, or at least understand the best argument. To me, the best argument for Fedor is he was viewed as not only the best heavyweight, but he was viewed as the pound-for-pound best fighter for a while. And Stipe Miocic has never been viewed as the best pound-for-pound fighter. Mind you, the counter to that is, but Stipe fought in the era of John Jones and Khabib Nurmagomedov and Demetrius Johnson, not Chuck Liddell, Vanderlei Silva. Like, it was a different era, better. But let's not go to it. I just wanted to see how how you viewed Stipe. Regardless, so basically, what I would say is this: if you feel that Stipe is the GOAT, fine. If you feel like Fedor's the GOAT, fine. But to say like, oh, this guy's the GOAT by far, that's where you lose
me. Yeah, because it's a theoretical and kind of esoteric discussion in the first place. So a lot of it just depends more on what you value and what criteria you're looking at than on facts. I mean, the facts, the records are there. None of those are changing, especially for fighters who are retired. It's just how much do you value being the greatest of your time versus this time?
Yeah, and
it's the same in any sport. I mean, if you're arguing about the greatest basketball player of all time as somebody who, played in the 1940s wearing like Chuck Taylors and everybody shot like two-handed set shots without jumping, like, is it even comparable?
Yeah. Bill Russell was winning championships. There's eight teams in the league. Yeah. And they had 12 Hall of Famers in the team. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's only one sport that there's no doubt no debate for who the GOAT is, and that's football. That's Tom Brady. All right, moving on. So let's talk about what's next for Stipe. So he said before he was asked, I don't remember who asked it, but they said basically, "Is there any chance you retire?" And he said, "I think about retirement every fight." They asked him about who's next for him in the post fight, and he's like, "I just want to go home, hang out with my family." But he's always been that way, so don't read too much into it. John Jones was tweeting. Afterwards, he tweeted, I don't have the exact word, but basically saying, I want next. The two, Francis Ngannou also tweeted, so Ben Duffy, you're the matchmakers. Everybody agrees with what you say. Who you giving the title fight for?
Obviously, if John Jones is interested, that is a historically important fight to make. Otherwise, it has to be Ngannou at this point. He's earned another shot.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, if John Jones wants to fight, you don't miss that opportunity. I don't like champions jumping weight classes unless you're a guy who's dominated. And I know John Jones' last fight against Dominic Reyes, I thought he lost. But regardless, when you are considered either the greatest by me or the second greatest by you, and we're gonna add that to the list because I'm gonna beat you on that debate too.
Okay.
Like you get to call your shot a little bit. You know what I mean? This isn't Jose Aldo coming off 2 losses to get a title shot. It's not Dominic Cruz being out for 2 years getting a title shot. Like, people have been calling for John Jones to move up forever.
Yep.
As far as, and then you also have Francis Ngannou has already fought Stipe. We've seen it. Now this is a different Francis Ngannou. I think he'd do much better. I mean, he couldn't do much worse. So we're both on agreement. That, to me, of all the matches we made, that was probably one of the easiest ones we've done. So let's go over to Daniel Cormier for a second. Do you believe that this is it, that he's done?
I do.
Yeah. I really hope so. Like, from what we saw tonight, he could still compete. He probably could have 1 or 2 good years left in him. I think he'd be Francis Ngannou. I don't want to face Francis Ngannou, but he could still maybe get a win over Francis Ngannou, or he could get a win over Fabricio Verdum, or whoever. I don't want to see that. I don't want to eventually see what happened to Randy Couture and get front kick to the face, knocked out. Like, I don't want to see that.
Right, and he sounds like a guy who is motivated not to become just another guy. And he has other avenues to have something to do with his time, to stay connected to the sport. He has other revenue streams, obviously commentary, coaching. So I hope he means it. His legacy is secure. He's one of the greatest fighters ever to do it.
Yeah, no, I know what you meant. I don't mean to insult other people, but they didn't have the same avenues. They had the retired MMA avenue. Like, okay, you could coach, you could, ref. Like, he has all kinds of avenues. A lot of the fighters. You can go to D-level acting, basically a glorified extra in a movie. Daniel Cormier doesn't have that. Right now, he has 2 shows on ESPN. He obviously has the AKA team. He could help coaching and be a fatherly figure, but he also does his high school wrestling. And it's Gilroy. This isn't most people's local. This is a nationally ranked, very high ranked wrestling program, like a top 10 in the nation. But I would like to see him completely replace Joe Rogan. Like, I just feel like it's time. I feel like I want to see DC working the pay-per-views. I want to see DC doing the in-cage interviews. Like, I think it's time for Joe Rogan to go.
I have no idea where Rogan's head is at. He did just sign that $150 million deal with Spotify. He's moving to Texas. Who knows? If he really is gone, I would love to see Cormier replace him. I like Cormier as a commentator and an interviewer, but I imagine Rogan has a job for as long as he wants. But then again, I thought the same thing about Mike Goldberg, so what do I know?
Yeah. Well, Mike Goldberg didn't have the same clout as Joe Rogan does. but also Mike Goldberg didn't have the distractions that Joe Rogan does. And I don't want to spend too much time. We're spending a lot of time in the main event, but this is obviously one of the biggest main events in the history, based on the significance, the legacy. 5 years from now, if Daniel Cormier is still, working fight nights, like, I'd be really surprised. Daniel Cormier, to me, has the most crossover Michael Strahan type. Michael Strahan was in the NFL, then he went over to the Today Show, whatever he did. Good Morning, I don't know, Good Morning America, whatever he did. Rock with WWF. Like, I'm not saying he's going to be an action movie star like Rock, but Daniel Cormier has that crossover feel. Like, I feel like I could see Daniel Cormier on ESPN talking about anything, or being on whatever, like sitting on Hollywood with Joan Rivers talking to Tom Cruise on the red carpet. Like, that's what, like, that, I feel like Daniel Cormier could be so much bigger. Do you see that too?
I could certainly see it. He's a charismatic and well-spoken guy. He strikes me as the kind of guy who could speak intelligently about other sports than mixed martial arts, which some mixed martial arts commentators, even ones who are good at their job, maybe couldn't necessarily do. I can't imagine Chael Sonnen or Josh Thompson, sitting on a regular panel just talking about the highlights of the NBA for the week. I could see Cormier doing so. So, you might be right. It's just really up to what he wants. 41 is only old on the inside of the cage. The world is otherwise his oyster right now.
Yeah. I really still think WWF's a possibility. I don't know if he'd want to do wrestling or maybe do a couple wrestling, but I could see him being a commentator, kind of Jerry Lawler type thing for some kind of connection to wrestling. Because he's a big wrestling fan anyways. But when I think about Daniel Cormier, I just think like the greatest ambassador of the sport. Inside, outside, fantastic competitor, like the kind of guy you want, always in trouble, never in trouble, always a family man, always does the right thing. Obviously very extremely well spoken, charismatic, everything you said. And if we went back in time and when we were fighting for sanctions and fighting to just be allowed on TV, like Daniel Cormier, the guy that I would want to go in front of Congress and talk. Like sitting there in a suit.
Oh, absolutely. Just makes me think back to 2004 and Dana White bringing Rich Franklin around to everything.
Yes, right. Yes, exactly.
This guy's a math teacher.
Yeah. and Rich Franklin was great, and I think Daniel Cormier would be even better.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And this will be the last question, and we'll move on. 20 years from now, when you think of Daniel Cormier, what's going to be his legacy?
One of the greatest fighters of his era, one of the greatest fighters of all time, as you've already said, an all-time ambassador for the sport. And I have the feeling that 20 years from now, we'll look back on 2020 as still a primitive era. I think we'll be in a different place in terms of publicity, regulation, the competitive level of the sport, that we'll look at 2020 like still kind of the leather helmet era of mixed martial arts.
Yeah, and to me, he's a guy, if he came 10 years earlier, we might be talking about him as the GOAT. He might have been in that. Because to me, he was always the wrong place at the wrong time. He was a heavyweight, but his teammate was, when he came to UFC, his team was already established, one of the top guys, future champion, leaves the weight class because of his teammate. Could have been a weight class that he could have dominated. He could have been the champion for 10 years. Goes down to John Jones, weight class. Daniel Cormier retires, and he's got technically 3 losses on record. Yeah, we'll call it 4. 2 losses to John Jones, 2 losses to Stipe Miocic. Those losses came to the greatest light heavyweight of all time and the greatest heavyweight of all time. Those are the guys who have wins over him. Yep. To me, it's fitting that this is how his career ends, just short. That sums up. Obviously, he had those moments. When he won the title, the heavyweight title, I said I said it on the spot. He was a couple months before his 40th birthday. I said he should retire. It's never going to be better than this. Just retire. Now, if he won, he beat Stipe tonight. That would have been that incredible moment. And I said on the roundtable, I don't know if anybody ever deserved to go on top more than Daniel Cormier. That's why I wish he retired 2 years ago. I said the same thing about Michael Bisping. When Michael Bisping beat Luke Rockhold, it seemed a little flukish, but then he had that rematch against Dan Henderson, and he beat Dan Henderson, and it was you won the title, which you've always been trying to get. Well, no, your run was you beat Anderson Silva, who's the GOAT in your weight class. You win the title, which you always wanted, and then you avenged the most devastating, embarrassing loss of your career. Retire now. I didn't need to see him get beat up. I definitely did not need to see him get knocked out by Kelvin Gastelum. I would just wish. I kind of wish DC went on top of the two belts. I'm a two weight class world champion. They just seem fitting.
Completely fitting, but they just dangled something in front of him that he couldn't walk away from. The picture just captures it perfectly. When Brock Lesnar is shoving him, you've never seen anybody so happy to be shoved by a 300-pound tower of muscle as Cormier. Cormier is grinning ear to ear as Brock Lesnar is shoving him across the octagon. It was what he had instead of I'm going to Disneyland. Yeah. After winning the Super Bowl. Yeah. He's I might get to fight Brock Lesnar, and if I fight him, I might also get to do a wrestling match with him, and I'm like a kid in a candy shop.
And that's the worst thing. He didn't even get that. He didn't even get that. Like,
it never materialized.
And that would have made sense. You get a very fair stylistic match. Daniel Cormier probably would have knocked Brock Lesnar out on the feet first round. It would have been would have been the highest pay-per-view he ever had. The poor guy didn't even get that. Last thing I'll say about Daniel Cormier before we move on to the co-main event. I'll always remember Daniel Cormier's entrances. It always gives me goosebumps. To me, it's going to always be. Yeah, we just talked about Michael Bisping with the woohoo. That was like always one of my favorites. Matt Hughes always had good ones, but Daniel Cormier with that song. I don't know the name of the song, but that song he has, and he slaps his legs in his head and then does that jog. It's always one of my favorite entrances.
Yep, great memories.
With his like high school wrestling coach like body and shorts with the sweatpants underneath.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on to the co-main event. Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Chito Vera. Marlon Vera won by first round TKO. Very controversial fight. How did you feel about the stoppage?
I thought it was a good stoppage. I was fine with it, just because he wasn't knocked out, although I think that was coming in just a few seconds, but he was in obvious pain.
Yeah.
I mean, he was in obvious pain from his foot, and then also in obvious pain from the elbow. You know, just kind of like when Rico Rodriguez stopped Randy Couture.
Yeah.
Couture was fully, he was awake. He wasn't knocked out. He was just in pain. Yeah. And so why make Rico punch him in the face 3 more times until he's dead? I felt the same way about this. I'm glad for the stoppage. I can't imagine O'Malley's going to complain about it, since he literally didn't even stand up after it was done.
No,
couldn't stand up. So it sounds like a good stoppage to me.
Yeah, I love the old school reference. You know, like that always gets me excited. Mohegan Sun Arena.
Yeah,
I was in attendance.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, you're going to get some 2002, 2003 references from me.
Yeah,
for sure.
A couple things. Like, if you watch that video in like a 3-second highlight, you'd say terrible stoppage. I mean, he got hit with 2 hard elbows. Okay, but if you watch that in a 30-second highlight, you go, oh yeah, no, he needed to be out. Like, that was a mercy stoppage, because it was a little early, but all the totality of circumstances adds to it.
Yeah. And the thing is, hell, Vera didn't have to hit him at all. Like, what if Vera hit him with the first elbow and then just stood up and said, "Get up," and O'Malley can't get up? Like, fight's over.
So on the round table, me, you, and Tom Field, we all 3 of us picked first round knockout. We just picked the wrong guy.
We picked the wrong guy. And the thing is, obviously, not taking anything away from Vera, he won the fight. He won it fair and square. And upon further tape study, we may even realize that O'Malley hurt himself kicking Vera, just because Vera was using, good, proper technique to check kicks. So this is not taking anything away from Vera. But if you run that fight 10 times, that's the only time it looks like that. Yeah. I still feel the same about the dynamic, like as I called it beforehand, where Vera is maybe the best fighter in the UFC that would give O'Malley the fight he needs to shine to that extent. Yeah.
So we talked about, O'Malley being the guy who gets out to a fast start. The times he's looked human, going back to the Terran War, he kind of faded late. And Marlon Vera is the opposite. Marlon Vera is just always a slow starter, almost always loses the first round, then picks it up. So it's hard to really grasp how good Sean O'Malley was looking, because we knew that. We knew he was looked good early. But he looked like what we seen him in all his other fights. He was styling on Marlon Vera. It was only 2 minutes, 3 minutes in, but then he rolled his ankle. Like you said, it could have been from a check kick. It could have been. I don't even know if Marlon Vera kicked his leg, like those calf kicks, that kind of that Michael Chandler dead foot leg or Henry Cejudo thing that happened. But he's injured. He's injured again. Let's put a pause on Sean O'Malley. Let's finish up Marlon Vera. He's on a roll now. I mean, if a lot of people thinks he should have beat Song Yadong. I mean, Joe Rogan was ranting on it. He was ranting on it. If he did, he'd be on this huge winning streak. Kind of guy just outside the top 15. Who would you like to see him match up with next?
Uh, I like Jimmy Rivera.
Okay.
You know, Rivera.
They were supposed to fight each other. Remember?
Yeah, like he made it sound like he still wants it. And considering just how much of the bantamweight kind of top 10 or 15 is busy, that might be the most appropriate guy that has an opening on his dance card right now. So I'm all for it. Anytime two guys want to fight each other, two girls want to fight each other, and it makes sense competitively, make it happen.
Yeah, they have a little bit of bad blood because when I think was it John Dotson pulled out of the fight with Jimmy Rivera. Jimmy Rivera needed an opponent. Marlon Rivera asked for it. At that time, he wasn't nearly highly sought of, and Jimmy Rivera originally said yes, and then it was like, nah, I don't want to fight that guy, and then the fight didn't happen, and then they got rebooked, and Jimmy Rivera pulled out again. So there's some bad blood. I was putting Merab Dvalishvili because they're on the same card. I think it would be fun stylistic with the grappling and the wrestling. But you've convinced me. I didn't think of Jimmy Rivera. You've convinced me. I'm going to agree with you. Like that's a good matchmaking.
And honestly, that was my first thought too, was Vera versus Merab. But then I remembered that there was the Rivera thing. But otherwise, yeah, just you already know they're on the same schedule. Neither of them was hurt bad. You know, they both basically won without a mark on them. So I'd be fine with either of those.
Yeah, and plus think about how fun the commentating would be. Keep saying Jimmy Rivera versus Marlon Vera.
See, the one thing I'll say is it's so hard in a crowded division, like say anything from 135 to 170, for a guy outside the top 15 to get a top 10 or top 15 opponent. Just so it makes me feel bad to make Vera and Dvalishvili fight each other just because they're both on such good runs within the division. If there's a chance for at least one of them to take a step up and fight a top 10 or former top 10 guy like Rivera, let him have it. Give some people a chance to just grab that bottom rung of the ladder and pull themselves up.
No, I'm agree with you. I think that was a really good matching. Let's move over to Sean O'Malley. I don't want to do any matchmaking with him because who knows how long he's out. He had to get taken out in a stretcher. Megan O'Leary did talk to Sean O'Malley, and he says he thinks it's the same injury he had with Andre Supatok, which put him out for a while. This is twice now we've seen it happen to him in fights. He also had that run-in with he likes to smoke weed and get in trouble for it, and then he had levels. I mean, he's had a bunch of stuff to keep him out of the cage. I can't even keep track of it. He's 25, and I by no means am giving up on him. I was driving to train, but you got to ask the question, like, is he injury prone? Is this a thing we're going to have to deal with? Like, is he this guy who has all the talent in the world, but he's never going to be able to be in the cage? Like, is he the Terrell Davis of MMA? Is he going to be like Cain Velasquez and Dominic Cruz?
I was about to say, why does he have to be the Terrell Davis of MMA when there's plenty of MMA versions of this?
I was going to say like Cain Velasquez and Dominic Cruz, but those guys actually won championships and it was later. No. And even the Terrell Davis one, I mean, he won 2 Super Bowls, so that's not...
No. Like, right now, he's looking more like Josh Thompson, a guy that when he's healthy, just everybody who trains with him, everybody who's fought him is like, this guy is the best lightweight on the planet when he's healthy and in the right place, but he's never healthy and in the right place. I hope that doesn't happen. You know, he's only 25, so just knock on wood, they're able to get this solved for him. I would hate for him to be a guy that just shows up every couple of years, completely dazzles us, and then disappears again.
Yeah. And let's not forget, there's a guy in MMA that fit this exact thing about the young fighter who was undefeated, couldn't stay healthy, and that guy's name was Khabib Nurmagomedov. And then he got healthy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I think about, not to change topics, but like football, Frank Gore. There was a time where Frank Gore was this injury-prone like running back. Now he's in like year 30, I don't know. He's like 100 years old, and he's still playing way beyond. He went from the injury-prone guy to like this rugged, durable guy. Yep. So hopefully Sean O'Malley can get some good luck. A lot of people was upset with Marlon Vera, like overreacting to the win. He said in Spanish, like, O'Malley's a bitch. Like, what do you think about all that? Like, Twitter made a lot of it.
Don't care. I don't care about it at all. I don't. On a human level, I like it when, classy, likable dudes win. I like it when, Daniel Cormier, has a Hall of Fame level career, while being a decent citizen and family man. But As far as what I see in the cage and what I want to see in the cage, don't care. Vera he's a super emotional guy. He's a guy that seems to need to feel disrespected in order to get that motivation. People made a big deal of him not wanting to slap hands with Song Yadong after he felt he got robbed. Like, dude, he's at a low point right there. Don't make him do social interaction. Let him go be mad, and he'll probably say something classy tomorrow. Like, just don't put him on the spot.
And don't forget, he just lost half of his check because he didn't get it. He has to get a win bonus now.
Yeah. This isn't T-ball.
Yeah.
This isn't like a line of 7-year-olds like being forced to slap hands with each other.
Speaking of guys that weren't slapping hands, they were throwing bombs at each other. Well, most of the time they were just staring at each other, but eventually when bombs were thrown, someone got knocked out, and that was the matchup between Junior Dos Santos and Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Jairzinho Rozenstruik in the second round knocked out Junior Dos Santos. Both guys were very, very gun-shy.
Yes. For good reason.
I mean, for one, they both hit hard, but Junior Dos Santos was knocked out his 2 previous fights. Jairzinho Rozenstruik was knocked out in his previous fight. Jairzinho Rozenstruik is yet probably his best win. I don't know if Overeem won or this one. It's they're both neck and neck, but he gets a knockout win on a high-profile pay-per-view, and I don't feel better about him. Like, the output is going to be an issue. Like, of course he could be gun-shy, but his output against, like, when he threw punches at Elsa Overeem, he was winning that fight. When he threw punches, he just didn't throw punches. And don't worry, I'm going to get to not throwing punches in a little bit. But
okay, good.
Trust me, I'm riling up. I'm starting just getting. You probably can hear my voice. I'm getting riled up. But I don't like the giving away rounds and then relying on power. Like, as soon as Jairzinho Rozenstruik just said, "Hey, maybe I should try to punch him," like the first time he said, "No, I'm gonna move forward," he knocks 5 seconds later. He knocks out JDS. Like, I feel like he could have knocked out JDS 15 seconds in this fight. Like, as soon as he could hit him one time, he's going out.
I'm gonna congratulate myself here. I'm not a great analyst, but in the Sherdog roundtable for this fight, I said he's got 15 minutes to touch him. He probably only needs to do it once, so watch for him to win after losing the first round just because he didn't throw any volume. I didn't expect him to throw that little volume in the first round. Like, that was a very tentative first round, but other than that, it's like as soon as he decided that he was comfortable with where he was and what was going on enough to extend himself just a little bit, just JDS used to have good defensive fundamentals and a great chin, and they've both just slipped a bit. He's a very old 36.
Yeah. Well, his volume looked like Tony Ferguson's compared to another fight we'll get to in a little bit. Let's do some matchmaking real quick. Rozenstruik, who would you like to see him going against?
Dude, this is impossible. Everybody has a date. Harrison Volkov, Overeem and Sakai, Lewis and Blades, Arlovsky and Bozer, Green and Hardy. I say give him Chase Sherman.
Okay. There you go, Chase Sherman. Is Lewis Blades, is that official?
It's not official, but it's going to happen.
That's the one I was thinking, because I would say let's do Derek Lewis. But if John Jones jumps the line, that changes everything. You could put one guy to wait on the sidelines. You can't have multiple guys waiting on the sidelines. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say he could even wait for some of these to play out, except that he's already beaten some of these people. Like, he can't wait for Arlovsky Bozer because of what if Arlovsky wins? He's already iced the guy. Same for Overeem and Sakai. What if Overeem wins? So
doesn't it just have that feel like he's going to be a replacement when someone gets injured?
It's entirely possible, so maybe they just leave him idle for the moment. Because, I was picking through the UFC heavyweight division, like literally everybody who's fought this year, and Chase Sherman was the only guy that I could come up with that, like, has a win that wasn't just a debuting fighter knocking out another debuting fighter and doesn't have his next fight lined up. It's ridiculous.
Oh, could you imagine? Could you imagine him versus Chase Sherman? Oh, God.
Well, what else are we going to do? Give him
I know.
Chris Dawkis?
No, yeah, I don't know. You know what? With his wrestling, though, they still have a possibility of beating him. Like, if you're going to be the short notice replacement, because he shouldn't have been injured. If you're gonna be short notice replacement, like pray Derek Lewis doesn't get hurt, because do not get a match against Curtis Blade. Like that is the worst stylistic matchup. Let's go to JDS. I think he needs to retire. This is his third knockout in a row. His chin's going. I want to see him retire.
I would love to see that as well, and it's not going to happen. So talk about give him like the Chase Shermans of the world. He needs to step way down if he's going to keep fighting.
Yeah, he just seems like a guy like he'll eventually go on to Bellator and be fighting Matt Mitrione, and then when Bellator's done with him, he'll be fighting like some fighting Paul Bunatello in bare knuckle boxing. Like it just seems like that kind of guy.
Yep.
You just talked about your analysis on this one, but dude, how about your analysis on the fight before, man? Are you the only person on the the only person on the Sherdog staff to take Daniel Pineda to beat Herbert Burns? Pineda looks. He survived some scary situations in both the first and second round. Eventually getting the second round TKO. Mounted him at one point. Had the crucifix. Was destroying him. Nice call. So let's talk about, first of all, Herbert Burns missed weight by 3.5 pounds. So Pineda get an extra $20,000. Before you talk about the fight, brag about yourself, man. Good call.
Hey, and this was me flipping at after the weigh-ins, because at the Sherdog Roundtable, I just pointed to Burns as like, this is a tough matchup for Pineda. Because the thing is, Houston, geographical loyalty aside, Pineda's a super dangerous guy. He has all the offensive weapons, but my thought was Burns isn't the guy for him to like sneak up and upset. He's just much bigger, well, obviously, and a literal world-class grappler in a sport where we throw around the term world-class too often. I just said this isn't the upset special for Pineda, but when Burns missed weight that badly, I said, maybe he's not at his best for some reason. And if he lets it slip at all, Pineda is so aggressive and so oriented towards the finish. Because as you mentioned, Pineda was in trouble a couple times, but he never stopped looking for offense.
Yeah.
He just fearlessly went to the ground with Burns.
Yeah. No fear. Yeah, in the first round, Burns almost submitted him. He survived that. It was like when Burns, I think he had his back in the first round, and they were like, oh, yeah, of course. There's different levels to grappling. Burns is going to submit him. Then he survived that, won the round, and Burns barely got out of the first round. Then he got him down, took his back end, and you're like, oh, all right, you got to have that one moment, and everyone's going to, next time we talk about Burns, be like, oh, he's not that good. Pineda almost beat him, but he survived the second one, and then teed off him. What really stood out to me, a couple things, between the first and second round, Burns looked done. Like he was tired. He looked like he was out of it. He looked like he was giving up. And
he was wobbly on his feet.
Yeah. Then he had he had his, he had a quick takedown, had his back. He's like, all right, cool. He's gonna finish this. And then when Pineda reversed it, like he broke. Like you could see him physically before the beating, and the beating came, but he physically broke. Gilbert Burns said something. They were talking about when Herbert Burns was walking down to the cage, they said, Gilbert said that Herbert's the better one. He as in Gilbert,
just a harder worker. Yeah.
Was that like a backhanded diss on his brother?
I don't think it was meant that way, but by the end of the fight, it sure seems prophetic.
Like it. Yeah. Let me ask you this. Is Pineda good, or is Burns not as good as first advertised? Like, is this more on Burns or more on Pineda?
I picked Pineda to win for a reason. I think he's much better than his record looks. He's an extremely dangerous fighter who's, he's fought a lot of his career out of his weight class. He's been match tough. I mean, I don't think he's a future UFC champ, but I think he's been UFC material this whole time and just caught some bad breaks. I'm looking at Burns, and I don't think he's washed. I don't think he's done. But maybe we've seen his ceiling. I mean, what are his best wins? He completely wiped Evan Dunham, who was coming back from years off and just should not have. I don't. And he's 32, so I don't think he's going to add a whole bunch of new tools to his toolbox. I don't know if a fully healthy Burns beats Pineda, and I don't know if there was anything wrong with Burns or he just didn't make weight because he didn't work hard enough. But yeah, I mean, I picked Pineda to win for a reason. Like, I'm a little surprised, but not that surprised. Pineda's better than most people thought he was. Burns might not be as good as, we were pre-crowning him to be.
Yeah. Regardless of where Pineda goes in his career, how successful he is in his second stint in the UFC, it's still a really nice story. 6 years after he was cut for the UFC to work his way back, had a little stint in Bellator, didn't do well in that. If you count his, and then even the PFL, makes it to the finals, pops hot, gets removed, misses a chance at $1 million. If you give him those 2 wins, this guy would be on a 7-fight winning streak, and this is deep. The guy's 35 years old. To be on a 7-fight winning streak is pretty impressive.
Yeah, and you go back further than that. Like, before that 7-fight win streak, he was beating Georgi Karakhanyan, got cut wide open by an upkick in a fight that he was otherwise winning. Like,
Emmanuel Sanchez lost. I mean, this is 4 years ago. That's a split decision. Emmanuel Sanchez is good. Like Emmanuel Sanchez. Like, I don't expect him to win the featherweight Grand Prix if that's even still happening. But he, like, it wouldn't shock me either. Like, he gave a Pitbull a good fight. Like, it was a competitive fight. He won rounds against the current champion. All right. The first fight of the pay-per-view, John Dodson versus Merab Dvalishvili. Merab Dvalishvili wins a unanimous decision. Tell me I'm gonna let you talk about this fight first. Tell me what you think about this fight. Go ahead, go. I'm gonna be silent while you talk.
It looked exactly like I thought it would, only worse and more so. I mentioned on the round table that Dodson is one of my top scream at the TV fighters, where I just sit and watch him lose rounds minute by minute to a less skilled, less talented fighter than himself, and I'm just screaming at the TV for him to do something. Merab is a super aggressive rinse and repeat wrestler. At one point he was 0 for 8 on his takedowns, and I'm like, doesn't matter. He's going to keep trying, and he'll get a few. He might not get some, but he's going to keep winning the rounds. And just Dodson didn't do anything. And between rounds, like after the first round, he was like, oh man, all he did was hug me. It's like, dude, no, he won the round. Like, yeah, like just worst fight IQ, no adjustments. Unbelievable. Terrible performance.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about Merab first. I don't think Merab looked great. He won a decision, but I don't feel better about him. Before the fight, I took John Dodson. I thought he had good takedown defense. I thought he could stuff some takedowns and land the better shots on the feet. Okay. I don't even know what I would say. This is one of the most frustrating fights I've ever watched. If you told me before a fight that John Dodson would stop 18 out of 20 takedown attempts, that the top control time of those 2 takedowns was 1 second, that Merab would land 50 significant strikes the whole fight, with 40 of them being knees. It was actually, I think it was 33 of them being little knees to the legs in the first round. If you told me that, like, that's what I would have been like, wow, John Dodson just styled on Merab, like exposed Merab. No, John Dodson, all that happened, and John Dodson lost a clear-cut 30-27. Like, clear-cut. They did not win a round. John Dodson, I don't even know what a waste of a talent. Like, his takedown defense was absolutely incredible. Like, he was getting picked up, and somehow he would twist his hips, and he's getting picked up in the air, and he still wouldn't land on there. He was scrambling. It was incredible. And then he just would not throw punches at all, like, ever. I couldn't imagine being his cornerman. Imagine being a cornerman, and you were in the back holding pads for him, and he's throwing combinations in the pads, and then you go out there and he's not doing anything. If I was there, if I was his cornerman, the commentating team would have changed and put the camera on me, because you would have heard me. I would have been going crazy on him. How could he possibly think me throwing one punch and backing away? How could he possibly think that's going to win him the fight? Tyler Treese of Sherdog in the private chat said if we talked about, and I don't know if I should give up. I don't know if I apologize. I already started saying this. I don't know if the private chat is
okay.
Okay. He wrote if John Dodson, if we scored his fight IQ, it'd be in the negatives.
Yep.
Dude, I would cut him if I was that upset. If I was Dana White, I would cut John Dodson. Like, why? He's boring. Occasionally he knocks a guy like Nathaniel Wood, but he wasn't throwing. Like, he beat Merab at everything you needed to beat him at and still lost. Like, he gave that fight away. It's so aggravating when you make a pick and it's so clear that he could win, and just the only thing he had to do was throw a couple punches. Like, he could have a very low output and he still wins that fight. Like, what the hell, dude? What, like, I don't know.
You know what the best kind of encapsulation of John Dodson is to me? And this will go a ways back, so, it'll indicate how long this has been a problem. You remember, of course, the famous Showtime kick that closed World Extreme Cage Fighting, where Anthony Pettis does, the running jump where he bounces off the fence, does the spin kick, lands it on Benson Henderson's jaw, knocks him down. It doesn't knock him out, but the round and the fight end, legendary moment. I remember, and I wish I could remember who it was, but somebody from Jackson Wink was like, that's not even that impressive. Dodson does those things in practice all the time. And I said, you think that by saying that you are elevating John Dodson and you are diminishing Anthony Pettis, but you're doing the exact opposite. That is the most damning thing I have ever heard about John Dodson, that he is capable of doing that against some of the best fighters in the world, but when he's actually in the cage with something on the line, what do we get?
Yeah. Like, Anthony Pettis went on to be a UFC champion.
Yeah. And 10 years later, John Dodson is still that fighter. The one that could do a Showtime kick anytime he wanted, but throws 7 punches around.
I mean, this is a guy who gave Demetrius Johnson, before the Henry Cejudo loss, gave Demetrius Johnson his hardest fight and was the trendy pick in the rematch to win. Like, he learned his mistakes in the first. Like, he let the first round get away. He's going to lose. He's going to win the second one, and then, did nothing against Demetrius. Like, I will vow on this, I will never pick John Dodson in a fight again. I don't care who he's going against. I'll fall further down the standings. I don't care. I'll never pick him again. Ever. Hold me to that. Anyways. I went easy.
I'll remind you.
I went easy because we try to keep this PG as much as we can. That was the main card. Let's go into the prelims. We're going to try to blast through these because we spent a lot of time. We're already over an hour. Jim Miller versus Vince Pichel. Vince Pichel wins a unanimous decision. We picked this. I picked this. You picked this fight right. I picked it wrong.
I picked it right on the round table. Flipped my pick and got it wrong. It turned out exactly like
good.
I said it was going to, and I'm an idiot.
Well, good, because so you had a good night analyzing, because Lena is not always about picking who wins. It's picking correctly how they win. I feel like I picked the wrong person. Like, obviously I picked the wrong person. I picked Jim Miller to win, but I feel like my analysis was right. Like, Jim Miller early, Vince Pichel late, and whoever wins the second is going to win it. And Jim Miller decided to jump on a guillotine. He must have learned that from Dan Hooker. I mean, I said that Dustin Poirier. And it paid for it because he couldn't get up on bottom, and Vince Pichel is just a brute, a junkyard dog type. He's going to keep coming. And Jim Miller couldn't sustain it, and he lost. To me, this is probably the worst loss that Jim Miller's had in a really long time, because he's losing to guys that he's been on a much higher level than these guys ever will be.
Yep. No, I agree. I mean, he has lost worse, but he has not lost worse to worse fighters than this.
Right. Yeah. It's like when Henan Barao went on this long losing streak, but then he kept losing, and it was like, oh, he's losing to good guys, and then he went down and was like, oh no, he just lost to Brian Kelleher. Or he just lost. That's where Jim Miller's falling fast. He still has some skills. He's still a tough test in the first round, but you can survive. It's going to be an issue. Vince Pichel, think he's like 6-2 in the UFC or something like that. That's like the quietest 6-2.
Well, it's because it's taken him 8 years. He fights once a year, so we keep forgetting about him.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, Shimaev has like this same amount of wins in like a month than Vince Pichel had in like 6 years.
Seriously.
Very impressive win for the next person. We had Felice Herrig versus Verna Jandiroba. Jandiroba ran right through Felice Herrig. Wins by first round submission by armbar, 1 minute and 44 seconds. I mean, this to me has like a breakthrough performance for Verna Jandiroba. She's 16-1, former Invicta champion. Her only loss was to Clara Esparza in a really close fight. People forget that. She looks like a top 10 talent to me for sure. Like,
yep, absolutely.
What I like about Jandiroba is her striking is gross. Like, it really needs a lot of improvement. But she knows that. She knows where she needs to go, and she goes right for it. She doesn't waste any time. She don't take any chances. As soon as Felice Herrig even came close to shooting range, she shot in, took her down, and just dominated her. Yeah, you have anything to say about this one?
Other than you were right and I was wrong. No. And for the record, I didn't pick Herrig to win. Yeah. I just said she's too much of an unknown quantity, but when she was at her best, Jandiroba is just the type of better fighter that she can kind of sneak up on. I was wrong. Like,
yeah.
It was a complete steamrolling on the ground. It was like, Verdun versus Gustafsson levels of once it hit the ground, everything was airtight. She was in the perfect position every time. She was 2 moves ahead and just completely controlled it. She needs to move up and start taking on top 10 fighters.
Yeah. So one thing we talked about on the round table is that I said that Jandiroba would win by submission, and you're like, oh, Felice Herrig's never submitted. You're not going to predict that.
I said I was wrong.
No. Listen to me. I wanted to like pat myself on the back, but shout out to Ryan Fortune. I don't know how to say his name. He was with me at the MMA Takeover. He's a writer for Cage Side Press. He pointed out that Randa Marcos on The Ultimate Fighter did submit Felice Herrig also by armbar. So I can't even brag about calling that one by submission because it has happened in the past, just not officially. Speaking officially, Danny Chavez has his first official win in the UFC. Really, really good performance against TJ Brown. Chavez looked good. He had nice. They kept talking about the broadcast. His hand speed, the kicks. He just went to town on TJ Brown's kicks. Every time TJ Brown stepped in the orthodox stance, Danny Chavez met his front leg with a calf kick. But the other thing that wasn't talked about that I was really impressed is the takedown defense. Like TJ Brown tried wrestling. TJ Brown's a good wrestler, and Danny Chavez like just stoned him. Like,
yep.
Brown had incredible heart. I give him that. A lot of guys would have went out with those calf kicks, would have given up. He fought through it. He kept switching stances, and he actually probably won the third round. I think one or two judges gave him the third round. So yeah, this is a really fun fight. What did you take from this?
The Chavez was a bit of a revelation. I watched as much tape as was available on him, but between what was available on the tape and just the very sporadic nature of his fight career, because he's the type of guy that's had a couple fights, then disappeared for literally 2 years, and then come back and had a couple more fights. Not undefeated. I mean, he's lost some as well. I just did not expect this level of performance from him. He looked sensational. And it was obvious right away. 90 seconds in, I was like, all right, there's a difference of degrees in the hand and foot speed and just the general striking acumen of these two guys. So, shocker. Great. Good. Pleasant surprise.
When you mentioned him taking off for 2 years, I just imagined Vince Pichel being like, what? That's not taking time off. Before that, we had Lavia Hinata Souza beating Ashley Yoda by unanimous decision. This was probably the closest fight, at least in the judges' scorecards, like what people were debating. I scored at 29-28 for Souza. I'm okay with a scorecard for Yoda. How did you score it?
I scored it 29-28 for Yoder. Okay. I gave her the second and third.
Okay.
But they were difficult, the rounds to score. Like, I thought the first round was pretty clearly Souza round. The second and third were difficult to score. So I'm not mad at somebody giving Souza 29, 28 either. I thought the 30-27 was a little iffy. I felt pretty strongly that the third round was Yoder. But yeah.
Yeah, I know Souza got a takedown late in one of the rounds. I don't know if it was the second or third round. That might have been the difference in the fight. To me, it was Yoda was doing well at length, or she was doing well all the way in. And Souza was doing well when she was way out of even Yoda's range, and when she would just like pop in, pop, and then jump back out. Like that was working. But both of the fighters didn't stick to that strategy and started giving into the other person's. But yeah, it goes back to what I said about Souza. Yeah, this is a girl. She does not look like she's getting better to me. She seems like she's getting worse. She looked better than Invicta, like much better. Like she was a promising prospect as a former Invicta champion, and just I'm not excited about it. Like this, she looks worse.
Yep, that's it. Like even if I thought she won, she didn't show any new wrinkles. She didn't look any more impressive in any way.
Yeah. Now I want to say the complete opposite for the next fight. Chris Dawkins was the guy that. When I did film study on, I was like he's not that good. And Parker Porter has been on the regional scene, same thing. Chris Dawkins was much better than he did film study. Dawkins knocked out Parker Porter in the first round. Dawkins, I mean, he looked like really crisp boxing. His hand speed was good. He stayed tight and he put Porter out. I mean, I know we were both kind of making jokes during the round table like that we weren't too high in these guys. Do you feel any different about Dawkins now?
I'm interested in seeing him fight again. That's all I'll say about it. Because once they engaged, kind of the same as in the Chavez and Brown fight, it was it was like a minute in where I realized that Dawkins his hand speed was better than I thought it was from watching tape. But I can't tell if that's because he was better than I thought or Porter was just one of the worst heavyweights to debut in the UFC in years.
Yeah.
I'm willing to give Dawkins the benefit of the doubt. I want to see him take on another kind of newcomer, but I'm not ready to mint him the next anything.
Yeah, I mean, when you see those boobs that Porter has, like you can't be too high. But then Dawkins has that muffin top thing going. I shouldn't be talking as I am not. It's
a tough world out there, in the modern UFC where you can't just, wear a t-shirt into the octagon like, Andre Roberts or or John Matua or something. Yeah. So yeah, it's a rough world.
Andre Roberts was the chief, so he could do whatever he wanted. First fight of the night, Kai Kamaka beats Tony Kelly by unanimous decision. This was an absolute barn burner, fun fight. Crazy output, crazy heart. By far the best fight of the night, including. We haven't seen the awards. I'm assuming the main event is going to get fight of the night. It should not. This fight should get fight of the night. This fight was fantastic. What impressed me most is both guys had moments in the fight where it looked like they were about to break, and the other guy was taking over and was going to finish them. And then they dug deep and went. They went to another area. Like they found more reserve. They went to the reserve tanks. 15-minute fun affair, nonstop action. If you missed the prelims, this is definitely the prelim to go check out. What do you think of this fight?
I agree that obviously because of the stakes, the main event will probably have won fight of the night. But stakes aside, this was the most entertaining fight of the night, and it was completely unexpected. It's easy to forget that before the era of COVID-19, fights where both guys were making their UFC debut were actually fairly uncommon. Now seems like we get at least one of them per card, and this is the best of them. This is the fight with both guys debuting where it was the best fight, and I left most impressed with both people. I did not expect this much out of Tony Kelly. Just again, another guy that's fought only sporadically, was brought in on, I think, all of like one win.
Yeah.
It's not like he'd been on a streak. He fought like once in the last 2 years and won that fight, and then that was it. So I didn't expect much out of him, but they were both excellent. I can't wait to see more of them. That
seems like the theme, like the two theme is low output and guys who haven't fought in forever. They fight once every 5 years. That's like the theme of the night. All right, there, guys, have it. We covered all 11 fights in the most comprehensive way possible. Let's go on to the cut list. Do you have anybody for the cut list?
I actually do. I only have one. I'm not even going to put Felice Herrig on the cut list, because if she wants to keep fighting, there are people she can beat, and there are people she can give a good test to, and she's not getting her face punched off every time she walks out there. I would love it if the UFC told Junior Dos Santos to, go out to pasture. Because I agree, he's on a 3-fight losing streak. They're all knockouts. They're brutal. He's reaching that plateau where he may be one of the people that has taken the most obvious damage in MMA history. He's right up there.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I would rather like to see him retire, because if they cut him, he's going to go to Bellator or something like that. What's going to happen if they keep him is one or two things happen. He's going to fight other aging heavyweights like a Ben Rothwell, and it's going to be a fight that nobody cares about, or he's going to be the name for the up-and-coming guy to get beat up, for your Surreal Gons and these guys to beat up, which... That if I'm running the UFC and I have to keep him, that's what I would do. But I think out of respect to him, you kind of have that conversation like, hey, dude, it's time to hang it up. And that's your only cut list?
That's it.
Okay, I got one more.
Uh-oh, what you got?
John freaking Dotson. Time to cut him. Cut John Dotson. I know he's only on a 1-fight losing streak. Cut him. Like, you put a performance like that where you decide you're not going to throw punches. I'm serious. Like, I would cut him. If I was... Sorry, John. Go do crazy Showtime kicks and Bellator and PFL or whatever, but he would not. If I ran the UFC, he would no longer be in the UFC. Maybe I'm living in the moment because I'm so frustrated. So let's go on to Bulls and the Bears. What would you like to do first, the Bulls or the Bears?
Let's do the Bears. Let's get the bad news out of the way.
So if you're not familiar with the Bulls and Bears, the first time listening to this, Bulls and the Bears is a stock market reference. When the stock market is going good, it's a bull market. When the stock market is going bad, it's a bear market. So we can pick 3 guys. I'll go first.
You go for it.
We'll up to 3 guys or 3 themes or whatever you want. I'll go my number 3. So this is the not the worst bull, not the biggest loser of the night, but Junior Dos Santos, as we just talked about, 3 knockouts in a row. He keeps talking about like getting his title back. Like, that's not going to happen. Number 2, Herbert Burns. Just missed weight, gets beat by a guy that you obviously are pretty high on. I'm still not high on Daniel Pineda, but gets absolutely trashed, getting out grappled. I mean, get crucifixed. Not good. But my number 1 bear of the week, John freaking Dotson. You knew who I was putting on there, John Dotson. All right, I'm not talking about John Dotson anymore. Go ahead. Give me your bears of the week. Okay,
I actually agree with you on a couple of yours, so I'll just add in 2 that I'm definitely feeling. 1, the least severe, is going to be Sean O'Malley. I mean, no matter how you spin it,
sure,
no matter what's going to come out of this afterwards, the fact is he was given an appropriate next step that was also in some ways a showcase fight, and instead he got sent out on a stretcher, and who knows what comes next. So bad look for him. Through a combination of factors, he's just not been a guy who's consistently in the cage performing his best, and that's a shame.
Yeah, I talked to when I was on that radio show. They asked me about the co-main event, and the guy said, "So with a win, will Sean O'Malley automatically get a title shot?" And I was like, "Absolutely not." But that's how some people actually viewed it. So yeah, that's a good call.
And I'm gonna go. My number 1 is going to be
John
Felice Herrig. Nope, because you already mentioned him. I'm not saying I don't agree, but I'm giving different things here.
He automatically has to be number 1. All right, Felice Herrig, go ahead.
Felice Herrig, she came back after 2 years away. I feel mean saying this. I don't mean to be mean, but such a drama queen about everything. Just complains that, she's not respected. She's not pretty enough. She comes back, has a chance to show, that she's still relevant, and she is not relevant. Yeah. She showed us just absolutely nothing, got steamrolled, and not even a spirited performance. Just that just kind of got game run on her by a very good grappler.
Yeah, it's hard to get excited. She's just the perfect middle of the road type female strawweight.
Yep.
Let's move on to the bulls. I'll let you go first this time. These are the three winners. Who's your three winners of the night?
My number 3 winner of the night is going to be Stipe Miocic.
Really? All right.
I mean, I almost feel bad for him because so much of the story is about the guy he beat.
Sure, yeah, of course,
but,
yeah.
I mean, this was a legacy-making fight. He showed up, and I mean, he outperformed one of the greatest fighters of all time, an extremely dangerous guy, and through it all, he's just the very same, personality he's always been. Yeah. He knows what he cares about and what he doesn't care about. And that's the kind of mentality that makes for a good work-life balance that a lot of mixed martial artists don't have. And it's why he is the best he's ever been as he approaches his 38th birthday.
Yeah. It's shocking how old he is. He just seems younger than that guy. So who's your number 2?
Number 2, Berna Jandiroba.
Nice.
This wasn't much of a test for her, but it could have been under other circumstances. But she did what a top 10 fighter is supposed to do to Felice Herrig.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's something to be said for not shocking us, but just doing exactly what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Number 1 bull. What else could it be than Daniel the Pit Pineda?
Of course.
It's
it's a good call.
It's biggest upset of the night, and even bigger than Vera over O'Malley. And yeah, he looked fantastic. We'll find out in the coming days whether there was anything compromising Burns' performance. But whatever version of Burns went out there, Pineda just went after him fearlessly, punished him in all positions, and ended up like pounding out a Mundial's winner from the crucifix.
Sure, yeah. No, definitely good performance. I did not put Pineda on my list because I was looking at the opposite, that it was more people going to be talking about that this was a poor performance from Burns than Pineda. And that might be wrong to me, but I'll give you mine. Vernon Jandiroba already said she was actually my number 2. My number 3 is Kai Kamaka versus Tony Kelly. I put them both in there because we were making jokes about these guys should be fighting the Contender Series. Now we got excited about those guys, want to see them again. So I think their stock rose greatly. Number 2, I said Vernon Jandiroba. Everything you said, I agree. And number 1 is someone you also said, Steve Miocic. When you beat Daniel Cormier twice, you cement yourself as the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time, and in many people's opinion, the greatest heavyweight. And people are starting to talk about top 5, top 7, whatever. Just great night for him. So Stipe Miocic makes the list. Last question. Give us your overall grade of the card.
I'm going to give this card a B+. It had a couple of really, really good fights on it. A few bummers. Bad decisions and kind of referee gaffes always leave a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. But I'm going to give it a good solid B+.
Yeah, I have it. I wrote down B-, and the only reason I'm a little bit lower than you is the co-main event. This kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth. Like if Vera ran through O'Malley, that'd be different. I probably would give it a B+. But to see that end with a freak injury of a fight that I was pretty excited about, to see how O'Malley would do with his first tough test. But still a good grade. It's definitely worth the night of watching it. There you have it. We have covered all the fights plus all our extra stuff. Ben, tell the people where they can find you.
You can find me at SureDog.com. There's a little drop-down menu on the front page under features. My name is there. Or you can certainly find me here every weekend after every major card.
Guys, you can follow me at Keith Shillan MMA on Twitter. That's KeithShillan MMA. You can follow me on Twitter. Guys, make sure you like this video, share it. I don't ask you guys people to do that a lot, but like it, share it. We're going to be doing these. We do it every single week. We're going to try to do it a lot more directly after the event so it gets up quicker. So if we're going to try to get this live eventually where you can listen to it while we're going. But, just help us continue to grow the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network and the SureDog Radio Network. And, guys, we'll be back next week. Talk to you then.